Coptic or Coptic Egyptian Nkhemi is the latest stage of the Egyptian language, a northern Afro-Asiatic language spoken in Egypt until at least the 17th century. Egyptian began to be written in the Coptic alphabet, and adaptation of the Greek script with some letters inherited from Demotic, in the 1st century AD. The new writing system became the Coptic script, an adapted Greek alphabet with the addition of 6 or 7 signs from the Demotic script to represent Egyptian sounds the Greek language did not have. Several distinct Coptic dialects are identified, the most prominent of which are Sagredo, originating in parts of Upper Egypt, and Bohairic, originally from the western Nile Delta in Lower Egypt. Coptic and Demotic Egyptian are grammatically closely related to Late Egyptian, which was written in the hieroglyphic script. Coptic flourished as a literary language from the 2nd to 13th centuries, and its Bohairic dialect continues to be the liturgical language of the Coptic Orthodox Church of Alexandria. It was supplanted by Egyptian Arabic as a spoken language toward the early modern period, though revitalization efforts have been underway since the 19th century. Name: the native Coptic name for the language is Mentramenkhemi in the Bohairic dialect, and Mentramenkhemi in the Sagredo dialect. The particle prefix ment, from the verb muti, forms all abstract nouns in Coptic. The term remenkem, meaning Egyptian, is a compound of rem, which is the construct state of the Coptic noun man, human being, plus the genitive preposition en, of, plus the word for Egypt, kemi, kema. Thus the whole expression literally means language of the people of Egypt, or simply Egyptian language. Another name by which the language has been called is Mentkuptayan, from the Copto-Greek form Mentaguption. The term logos and aguptios is also attested in Sagredo, although logos and aguptios are both Greek in origin. In the liturgy of the Coptic Orthodox Church, the name is more officially T-Asper en Remenkhemi, the Egyptian language, Asper being the Egyptian word for language. Geographic distribution. Coptic is an extinct language, in the sense that it has no native speakers. However, it is presently a liturgical language of the Coptic Orthodox and Coptic Catholic churches. Coptic was spoken only in Egypt, and historically has had little influence outside of Egypt proper, with the exception of monasteries located in Nubia. Coptic's most noticeable linguistic impact has been on the various dialects of Egyptian Arabic, which is characterized by a Coptic substratum in lexical, morphological, syntactical, and phonological features. Influence on other languages in addition to influencing the grammar, vocabulary, and syntax of Egyptian Arabic. Coptic has lent to both Arabic and Biblical Hebrew such words as timsah, crocodile, emsa. This subsequently entered Turkish as timsah. It should be noted, however, that Coptic is grammatically masculine and hence would have been vocalized pemsa or bemsa. Hence it is unclear why the word should have entered Arabic with an initial T, which would have required the word to be grammatically feminine. Tuba, brick, Sagedic to be, Bohairic to by. This subsequently entered Catalan and Spanish as tova and adobe respectively, the latter of which was borrowed by American English. Waha, oasis, Sagedic wahe, Bohairic wehi. A few words of Coptic origin are found in the Greek language. Some of these words were lent to various European languages. An example of this is the Greek alpha sigma iota sigma oasis, which comes directly from Egyptian wh3t or Demotic whi. Yet Coptic re-borrowed some words of ancient Egyptian origin back into its lexicon via Greek. For example, both Sagedic and Bohairic used the word ebonos, which was taken directly from Greek beta epsilon nu omicron sigma, ebony, originally from Egyptian hbny. The Coptic name, Papnute, means the of God. It was adapted into Arabic as Babnorda, which remains a common name among Egyptian Copts to this day. It was also borrowed into Greek as the name pi alpha phi nu omicron upsilon tau iota omicron sigma. That, in turn, is the source of the Russian name of, e.g., the famous mathematician Pafnuty Chebyshev. The Old Nubian language and the modern Nubian language borrowed many words of Coptic origin. History. Egyptian may have the longest documented history of any language, from Old Egyptian that appeared just before 3200 BC to its final phases as Coptic Egyptian in the Middle Ages. Coptic belongs to the later Egyptian phase, which started to be written in the New Kingdom. Later Egyptian represented the colloquial language. It had analytic features like definite and indefinite articles and periphrastic verb conjugation. Coptic therefore is a reference both to the most recent stage of Egyptian after Demotic, and to the new writing system that was adapted from the Greek alphabet. Coptic before the Islamic period. The earliest attempts to write the Egyptian language using the Greek alphabet are Greek transcriptions of Egyptian proper names, most of which date to the Ptolemaic period. Scholars frequently refer to this phase as pre-Coptic. However, it is clear that by the late Pharaonic period, Demotic scribes regularly employed a more phonetic orthography, a testament to the increasing cultural contact between Egyptians and Greeks even before Alexander the Great's conquest of Egypt. Coptic itself, or Old Coptic, takes root in the 1st century. The transition from the older Egyptian scripts to the newly adapted Greco-Coptic script was in part due to the decline of the traditional role played by the priestly class of ancient Egyptian religion, who, unlike most ordinary Egyptians, were literate in the temple scriptoria. Old Coptic is represented mostly by non-Christian texts such as Egyptian pagan prayers and magical and astrological papyri. Many of them served as glosses to original hieratic and demotic equivalents. The glosses may have been aimed at non-Egyptian speakers. Under late Roman rule, Diocletian persecuted many Egyptian converts to the new Christian faith. This forced new converts to flee to the Egyptian deserts. In time, the growth of these communities generated the need to write Christian Greek instructions in the Egyptian language. The early fathers of the Egyptian Church, such as Antony the Great, Pachomius, Macarius and Athanasius, who otherwise usually wrote in Greek, addressed some of their works to the Egyptian monks in Egyptian. The Egyptian language, now written in the Coptic alphabet, flourished in the 2nd and 3rd centuries. However, it was not until Shenouda the Archimandrite that Coptic became a fully standardized literary language based on the Sahadic dialect. Shenouda's native Egyptian tongue and knowledge of Greek and rhetoric gave him the necessary tools to elevate Coptic, in content and style, to a literary height nearly equal to the position of the Egyptian language in pre-Christian Egypt. Coptic. During the Islamic period, Egypt came under the dominance of Arab rulers with the spread of Islam in the 7th century. At the turn of the 8th century, Caliph Abd al-Malik ibn Marwan decreed that Arabic replace Koine Greek and Coptic as the sole administrative language. Literary Coptic gradually declined such that within a few hundred years, Egyptian bishop Severus ibn al-Muqaffa found it necessary to write his history of the patriarchs in Arabic. However, ecclesiastically, the language retained its important position, and many hagiographic texts were also composed during this period. Until the 10th century, Coptic remained the spoken language of the native population outside the capital. Persecutions under the Mamluks led to the further decline of Coptic, until it completely gave way to Egyptian Arabic around the 17th century. Though it may have survived in isolated pockets for a little longer. In the second half of the 19th century, Pope Cyril IV of Alexandria started a national church-sponsored movement to revive the Coptic language. Several works of grammar were published, along with a more comprehensive dictionary than had been previously available. The scholarly findings of the field of Egyptology and the inauguration of the Higher Institute of Coptic Studies further contributed to the Renaissance. Efforts at language revival continue to be undertaken, both inside and outside the Church. and have attracted the interest of both Copts and Muslims in Egypt. Writing system. Main article. Coptic alphabet. Coptic uses a writing system almost wholly derived from the Greek alphabet, with the addition of a number of letters that have their origins in Demotic Egyptian. There is some variation in the number and forms of these signs depending on the dialect. Some of the letters in the Coptic alphabet that are of Greek origin were normally reserved only for words that are themselves Greek. Old Coptic texts employed several graphemes that were not retained in the literary Coptic orthography of later centuries. In Sagredo, syllable boundary may have been marked by a superlinear stroke. Such words in the northern dialects have in place of the superlinear stroke. Some scribal traditions use a diaeresis over I and U at the beginning of a syllable. Bohairic uses a superposed point or small stroke known as a jinkum. It may be related to the Sagedic superlinear stroke, or additionally, it may indicate a glottal stop. Most Coptic texts do not indicate a word division. Literature. The oldest Coptic writings date to the pre-Christian era, though Coptic literature consists mostly of texts written by prominent saints of the Coptic Church such as Anthony the Great, Pachomius and Shenouda the Archimandrite. Shenouda helped fully standardize the Coptic language through his many sermons, treatises and homilies, which formed the basis of early Coptic literature. Vocabulary. The core lexicon of Coptic is Egyptian, being most closely related to the preceding Demotic phase of the language. Up to 20% of the vocabulary of literary Coptic is drawn from Greek, though borrowings are not always fully adapted to the Coptic phonological system and may have semantic differences as well. There are instances of Coptic texts having passages that are almost entirely composed from Greek lexical roots. However, this is likely due to the fact that the majority of Coptic religious texts are direct translations of Greek works. What invariably attracts the attention of the reader of a Coptic text, especially if it is written in the Sagredo dialect, is the very liberal use which is made of Greek loanwords, of which so few, indeed, are to be found in the ancient Egyptian language. Their Greek loanwords occur everywhere in Coptic literature, be it biblical, liturgical, theological, or non-literary, i.e., legal documents and personal letters. Though nouns and verbs predominate, the Greek loanwords may come from any other part of speech except pronouns. Words or concepts for which no adequate Egyptian translation existed were taken directly from Greek so as not to alter the meaning of the religious message. In addition, other Egyptian words that would have adequately translated the Greek equivalents were not employed as these were perceived as having overt pagan associations. Old Coptic texts employ many such words, phrases and epithets. For example, the word in mountain is an epithet of Anubis. There are also traces of some archaic grammatical features, such as residues of the demotic relative clause, lack of an indefinite article and possessive use of suffixes. Thus the transition from the old traditions to the new Christian religion also contributed to the adoption of Greek words into the Coptic religious lexicon. It is safe to assume that the everyday speech of the native population retained to a greater extent its indigenous Egyptian character, which is sometimes reflected in Coptic non-religious documents such as letters and contracts. Sounds. Coptic provides the clearest indication of later Egyptian phonology, thanks to its writing system, which fully indicates vowel sounds and occasionally stress pattern. The phonological system of later Egyptian is also better known than that of the classical phase of the language due to a greater number of sources indicating Egyptian sounds, including cuneiform letters containing transcriptions of Egyptian words and phrases, and Egyptian renderings of Northwest Semitic names. Coptic sounds, in addition, are known from a variety of Coptic Arabic papyri in which Arabic letters were used to transcribe Coptic and vice versa. They date to the medieval Islamic period, when Coptic was still spoken. Vowels. There are some differences of opinion among Coptic language scholars on the correct phonetic interpretation of the writing system of Coptic. Differences center on how to interpret the pairs of letters epsilon, eta and omicron, omega. In Greek spelling, the first member of each pair is a short closed vowel, e, o, and the second member is a long open vowel. In some interpretations of Coptic phonology, it is assumed that the length difference is primary. Thus epsilon, eta is e, and omicron, omega is o. Other scholars argue for a different analysis in which epsilon, eta and omicron, omega are interpreted as e and o. The following two charts show the two theories of Coptic vowel phonology. In the Upper Egyptian dialects, a superlinear stroke is placed over sonorants to mark a reduced e. This vowel does not undergo reduction in northern dialects, where it is indicated by imbaharican or infeumic. For example, me, to worship, is sah, akh, lyc, boharic and feumic. The vowel quality of e can vary, either e or, depending on the dialect. In Sahadic and other Upper Egyptian dialects, word final corresponds to word final in the northern dialects. The vowel is typically represented by its presence may be an indicator of emphasis spread in the same syllable. For example, is transcribed s in medieval Coptic, Arabic papyri. In some phonetic environments, o is a more open, and a is a more forward a. The vowel e is always unstressed and can be reduced to zero as in earlier Egyptian scripts, which did not indicate unstressed and most stressed vowels. Coptic also has 3 to 4 diphthongs, mainly aj, j, and or, although these may be interpreted as series of vowels and glides. In some dialects, they are monophthongized. Consonants. As with the vowels, there are differences of opinion over the correct interpretation of the Coptic consonant letters, particularly the letters n. The letter is transcribed as j in many older Coptic sources and as or t. Lambden notes that the current conventional pronunciations are different from the probable ancient pronunciations. Was probably pronounced t, and was probably pronounced k. Rientges suggests that was pronounced t. The following chart shows the consonants that are represented in Sahadic Coptic orthography. Consonants that are rare, or found primarily in Greek loan words are shown in parentheses. Boharic Coptic has an additional consonant, x, spelled. It is possible that in the ancient pronunciation of Coptic that there were additional consonants which were not spelled in the writing system, such as earlier phases of Egyptian may have contrasted voiceless and voiced bilabial plosives, but the distinction seems to have been lost. Late Egyptian, Demotic, and Coptic all interchangeably use their respective graphemes to indicate either sound. For example, Coptic for iron appears alternately as and. This probably reflects dialect variation. Both letters were interchanged with and to indicate f, and was also used in many texts to indicate the bilabial approximant, with. Coptologists believe that Coptic was articulated as a voiced bilabial fricative beta. In the present-day Coptic church services, this letter is realized as v, though this is almost certainly a result of the pronunciation reforms instituted in the 19th century. Whereas Old Egyptian contrasts per second and z, the two sounds appear to be in free variation in Coptic, as they were since the Middle Egyptian period. However, they are contrasted only in Greek loans. For example, native Coptic and school are homophonous. Other consonants that sometimes appear to be either in free variation or to have different distributions across dialects are t and d, r and l and k, and, with the voiceless plosives being more common in Coptic words and the voiced ones in Greek borrowings. Apart from the liquid consonants, this pattern may indicate a phonological change in later Egyptian leading to a neutralization of voiced alveolar and velar plosives. When the voiced plosives are realized, it is usually the result of sonorization in proximity to n. Old Coptic texts graphically express the Egyptian pharyngeals in a variety of ways. For example, the Old Coptic grapheme was occasionally used to convey a voiceless pharyngeal fricative. In literary Coptic, the two sounds are not indicated by separate letters, suggesting loss of phonemic status. Instead, the adapted demotic grapheme, which normally stands for h, is used to express either sound. In unstressed initial syllables and stressed final syllables, the voiced pharyngeal fricative is sometimes conveyed by as in, to multiply. Similarly, different methods are employed to graphically express the glottal stop, with word initially, with word finally in monosyllabic words in Northern dialects and in monosyllabic words in Acmimic and Asiatic, by reduplication of a vowel's grapheme, but mostly as